Okay, so welcome everyone to this on-demand session, part of the Genesis 2021 conference that is focusing on sustainable fashion. So giving a bit of context about these on-demand sessions we put together for Genesis, we wanted to address and discuss some of the big global challenges that biotech can address beyond developing new therapeutics or diagnostics options. And that includes elements of agro, food, and indeed fashion. And that's why we are here today, because we feel that's a very interesting topic to discuss further, that obviously is of interest for every one of us as individuals, but also as scientists. And also because they are developing really exciting technology that I'm sure you want to hear from and potentially or discuss further with them if you're interested. So we have two really innovative companies with us today. First one is Colorifix, represented by Sophie Vaud, and she will tell you in a minute what they are doing exactly. And the other one is Biotech, represented by Yudi Ding, and he will also explain to you what they're doing and how that answers to some of these big sustainable questions. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Sophie to start and tell us a few words about Colorifix and the big challenges that it is solving in this fashion industry. Sophie?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aline. First of all, I'd like to thank the Genesis community to invite Colorifix today and speak a little bit about what we are doing. So Colorifix has developed the first entirely biological dyeing process to produce, deposit, and fix biological dyes onto virtually any type of fabrics. This is being done without the use of any petrochemicals, any toxic chemicals, and by reducing drastically the water consumption and the carbon footprint. So how does it work then? First of all, we seek into looking at nature and what nature has to offer in terms of colors. Once we have identified related color pathways, we express them in safe and engineered microorganisms that are industrially relevant. And we ship them into small capsules to the production sites. Once there, they are readily available to seed a bioreactor that is a proprietary bioreactor into which we grow colors. These colors form then a dyeing liquor, and this dyeing liquor is readily available to dye in situ in the dyeing houses and can be directly injected into the already existing infrastructures and dye yarns or garments, etc., and be then directly linked and connected to the existing process.
Thank you, Sophie. Very interesting. And maybe we'll dig a bit into the exact where that applies later, but that's definitely a really good application of synthetic biology and microorganism work. Yudi, can you tell us a few words about Biotech, please?
Yeah, sure, of course. Thanks very much, Aline and Genesis for inviting us as well. So Biotech is building a collagen-based biomaterials that is similar to leather. The reason why we're using collagen, this protein, is because the collagen itself is the building block of real leather. We're using collagen that are extracted from industrial fish waste, as we identify that this is one of the most scalable and economically viable sources of collagen. And most importantly, this source has much lower environmental impact compared to the other source of collagen. From the extracted marine collagen, we use our patented processes and technology to transform it into a collagen sheet. Then we can further finish it to achieve a leather-like feel of the material. We're still early stage, but we're already producing prototypes and work with designers and factories to turn our samples into small leather goods, such as card holders and wallets. And we're planning our pilot trials early next year as well.
That's exciting. So you're producing the actual sheets, and then you are selling that to potential industrial partners.
Yeah, so we're B2B, and also depending on our clients, whether fashion designers or the houses, they have in-house finishing equipment. We can either supply the finished material to them or supply them with our base material, and then they can decide on how they would like to finish the material. So there's two ways that we can work with our clients.
Okay, so I wanted to kick off straight away and to talk about your, well, B2B, you mentioned it, because obviously you are working directly with industrials in that space. So you're offering to them, it's not a finished product, but it is a product they can transform easily. Is it easy for them to integrate in their way of developing the product, or does that need adjustment because of the product you are producing, Yudi?
Yes, so how we see our fitting on our current supply chain of leather industry. So the source of material is definitely different. So traditionally speaking, the leather comes from the slaughterhouse, and we go through various processes to remove the hair, the fat, and pickle it, and then dye it, tan it, and then final stage is finishing to give it a correct color and a touch. So what we do is that we skip a lot of the water-intensive and the chemical-intensive limehouse and beam house part of the work. We directly produce our material that is similar to a tanned leather material, and this material can be easily finished with the existing finishing equipment and technologies by our clients if they have the finishing equipment, or we can apply our own in-house finishing, which is going to be a standard one, and that they can directly use our material. So we're not directly selling a final leather piece to the end consumers, but we're working with designers and fashion houses to supply them with the material so that they can work on whatever leather good they want to sell to their end consumers.
Thank you. And yeah, I'll get back to that, but I just wanted to go back to Sophie quickly on the same question about where your product, which is the dyeing technique, and maybe you can tell us a few words about exactly how it works. How does that fit with the existing industrial dyeing processes that you have in the textile industry, and how? What's the response from them in terms of adopting that, and if that's easy or not?
Yeah, well, similar to Yudi, we have a B2B or B2B2B business model. So we either work with dyeing houses or with brands that actually introduce us to dyeing houses. So the way it works is that you dye fabrics in the dye house, then these fabrics gets into mills where it's assembled into garments that are then distributed by brands in a very broad understanding. So what we do is that we either go directly to dye houses, and we don't want to disrupt the industry. I mean, that's the textile industry. It's so steep in history and then century-old traditions that we can't really go there and then be the little disruptive, innovative company. So what we do, we understand how the textile industry works, and then we adapt. We remain flexible while bringing something that we think is going to bring a lot of sustainability into the process. So we work with dye houses, and then we implement fermentation directly in dye houses. And then we connect our bioreactors to the machines that are already existing, because you can't ask dyeing houses to buy more machines that would actually fit to our technology, because they would never accept that. The CapEx investment would be a lot higher, and then the technology would necessarily not be onboarded that easily. So instead, we make it easy for them, and that's the reason why we have developed bioreactors, so that we have an affordable, easy to operate, and reliable reactor that can produce this dyeing liquor directly in fermentation, in production sites. So we don't displace the activity, we actually create jobs around this machinery and these dyeing houses. And we also work with brands, because brands actually have an amazing network. So along the supply chain, we can also work with brands, and one of our investors actually is also a brand that can help us to understand the textile industry better and connect to the appropriate key players in the supply chain. So essentially, yeah, we adapt to the textile industry. We don't disrupt it, but we make it better and more sustainable.
Sounds good. And I'm sure they will like this argument of making it better and more sustainable. But how has been the response to that? Because I think you make every single effort to make it simple. It has to fit with the existing processes, but still, it's tiny change of operation and how you do that. How was the response from that? Do you have good negative feedback or anything you can try to improve?
Yeah, well, I think we are like actually in a transition period, especially in concerning the fashion industry. A lot of brands are pioneering a more sustainable approach to textile industry and to how we wear and produce clothes, actually. So there is a big enthusiasm, and we are immensely, warmingly welcomed in the fashion industry at every single level along the supply chain. That's amazing. Actually, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but today one of our clients is launching promotional capsule collection using our technology on their fabric. So it's an immense and we are very happy and very proud of the feedback we get. The reason why is that because we make the technology affordable and it works. It works at industrial scale. It's more sustainable in the sense that we have recently actually run a life cycle analysis, or LCA, on the dyeing process that we have implemented in a partner dye house. And we have compared it to exactly the same dyeing process to dye cotton, actually 40 kilograms of cotton, but in a traditional way. And our dyeing process helps to save about 50% of the water consumption. It helps to reduce the electricity consumption of about a third. And we eliminate the release of 31% of the CO2 emissions. So it's quite significant, and it's on cotton, which is notoriously not maybe the best indicator, meaning like we have extremely good results on cotton, but we expect even greater results on synthetic fabrics. The reason why is that cotton needs to be washed traditionally twice after being dyed, but synthetic fabrics need to be washed up to 8 times. And in our case, no matter what fabric you are using, we need to wash only once. And then we do obviously a lot of waste treatment and quality control to make sure that, but then after one wash, the water that comes out of it is clean. So we have an amazingly warm welcome in the fashion industry.
Yeah, so that sounds good. So do you have the same, Yudi?
Yeah, I want to follow up on what Sophie has just mentioned. I feel like the fashion industry is going through a transition rather than a trend for sustainable approach. So they're very welcoming for trying new technologies and to engage with innovators. So that's no doubt. And for us, every time when we speak with the new brands, we have sort of 100% conversion rate that they want to try our material, they want to touch it, they want to feel it. So that's great. And we're also very encouraged by the huge demand that is coming from the fashion industry. And also just to reflect what Sophie said about water saving, as we can incorporate the solution dyeing in our leather material making process. So as compared to the traditional leather industry, we have to soak the material in a dye bath and then let the dye penetrate through the leather material. Because we're using a bottom-up approach, we can calculate the exact amount of dye we need to incorporate it into the material that we're building. And this pigments or dye can be evenly distributed across the whole thickness of the material, which can lower the water consumption because we don't need to soak it and wash it. So it can actually reduce more than 80% or even 90% of the water used and give the color of the material. And also, we can define our material on a rectangular on a row, this sort of shape that is not observed in the traditional leather industry because it's very confined by the animal shape, whereas we can reduce the offcut waste from up to 60% of the material, depending on the industry, of course, but it's really a waste saving as well for us. For the full life cycle analysis, we haven't done it, but we're in the process of conducting our preliminary research, and we see the carbon footprint as well as water usage. It's reduced to up to 80 to 90%. So that's really encouraging on our side as well.
Thanks, Yudi. So this full cycle analysis, is that a prerequisite if you're working in sort of your industry's sustainable science or sustainable science? You must have that to be credible to work with industrial partners.
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways to do life cycle analysis, and then also it depends on what you take into consideration, what are the criteria you're looking at. But I think this is something that the brands start to conduct and to see in more details, which is good, because previously, the brands, when they approach an innovative material, they probably don't have a systematic ways to evaluate, how much sustainable this material is. So with life cycle analysis, with more guidance that how we define our impact to the environment is much more helpful for both the brand as well as the innovators to measure the impact and success.
I think that's a very interesting approach, and you're sort of forced into that because that's what you're selling, is a sustainable product. But that would be really interesting to see that more in the whole life science industry. So, do a life cycle analysis for, I don't know, a drug or a diagnostic that you're producing, which actually is leading to questions. So obviously you've got R&D to develop that type of product. And if the end product is definitely really good on the sustainability level, do you do similar analysis on your R&D processes, or I don't know, just being mindful of maybe or good practices you're trying to implement in your lab activity? Because it's a really, really important topic for everyone in life science. And so if you have any ideas, good practice to share, I think that would be great.
Yeah, maybe I can start first, and then Sophie, you can share later. So for us, we engage with our clients very early on, and they'll share with us their, for example, restricted product chemical list in manufacturing and product. So we go through that list to make sure that we're not, first of all, introducing those chemicals in our system. And secondly, for a lot of chemicals used in the tanning or leather industry, especially heavily discussed, like for example, heavy metals such as chromium is considered very toxic, especially chromium 6 is very toxic. So we're developing a more sustainable way of cross-linking the protein to tan the material, and also we also work towards using 100% bio-based cross-linkers, so that we can further push the boundary of how much the material we're making is a bio-based material rather than a synthetic plastic alternative, right? So we're looking at, for example, enzymes and other proteins that can help achieve that goal. So definitely we're aware at the R&D phase to be as close to the end product and to the clients, and to be transparent of what chemicals we're using, and measure along the way, like how much water we use, for example, in this formulation, and how that can be reduced in the iteration process. So that's how we conduct our R&D and be mindful about the chemicals and consumptions.
Wow, that's impressive. Sophie, I think you also have, obviously you're very conscious of your R&D sustainability. Do you have any few tips or good practices to share?
Well, sustainability is definitely at the heart of our innovation and R&D activities at different levels. So first of all, when we engineer microorganisms, and even when we actually select the chassis into which we're going to introduce our color pathway, we engineer strains so that they can use renewable resources, so that resources that don't compete with agricultural resources, because that wouldn't be really sustainable and that wouldn't be good for the local business as well. So we try to look into that to have renewable but yet standard resources. We also want to make sure that all of the products, all of the dyed fabrics that come out of our process are completely free of any chemicals. And then also the process itself needs to be like completely sustainable. So we look at always improving the way we make things so that we use less energy, less water. Can we actually shorten the dyeing process so that we use less electricity? Can we wash once instead of 8 times, as I was telling you? Can we actually, in the transport, cut down the cost as well? So that's why we ship actually the strain and not the dyeing liquid to the dye house. We try to make things in situ for one reason, is that everything is done as close as possible to the final infrastructure, which is actually the dyeing machine. We try to be sustainable all along the way. That's to minimize the impact we have on the planet, because we have only one planet. So better start as early as possible in the process.
Thanks, and that would be for a further discussion, but I think it would be really interesting to share a bit more widely all this good practice, because obviously, as you said, you two, sustainability is at the heart of what you're doing. That's part of your business model, and therefore that reflects also on your R&D processes. And so you may be more advanced than other organizations on this reflection and questions. And so having an opportunity to share more on that, I think that would be amazing. I just wanted to get back on this sort of adoption question, and obviously your B2B business means you're working with the industry, and you explain how well easy that is to embed your technology within what's already done. The warm welcome you're getting from the textile industry or the fashion industry, as you said, Yudi, it's really a transition. It's not just a phase. There is a huge interest, but are there any concern on their end? Doesn't mean it's a deal breaker, but it could be around the cost maybe, and that could be overcome by good discussion, or that could be capacity of scaling up for working with smaller organizations like yours. So I don't know if you experiment any of these, and if there's, I don't know, any way to help to overcome them. Yudi, have you had any of these
maybe I can
concerns, feedback?
Yeah, so I guess I know ChloriFix, you're currently doing a pilot study, so we're slightly earlier than you. So definitely we need to be careful on the who we're partnering with, because we're limited resources and cannot afford simply send samples to everyone who are interested in us. So we're looking for partners that are really agile and willing to accommodate at our early stage and can build significant value in terms of hitting our R&D milestones. And also in terms of the cost, so typically we've seen like studies saying that sustainable brands, their clients and their consumers are willing to pay a slightly more premium to the material, and especially luxury fashion houses, when they have a very huge markup, they can absorb a lot of cost increase. That's one thing at the early stage when production is low, and then it's likely to have a higher cost driven by the high demand. But I think for a company that wants to make an impact in the industry and make a scalable business, then we need to sort of embrace a product in the future when it's industrially available at not a premium cost, but in line with traditional material or traditional dye, for example, in Colorifix case. So the end consumer or our clients can opt into a more sustainable material without additional cost, because that's when the most impact can be made, when you don't have to sacrifice certain aspect in order to get another advantage. We want to make our material widely available in a larger scale as platform technology, so that more people can benefit from it.
Thanks, Yudi. And Sophie, any industry concern that you heard of and working on?
Well, I think it's a concern for any biotech or any startup that wants to penetrate the market. It's about commercialization and scale up. So in our case, we've been lucky to have a partner dye house where we have actually started the scale up. testing about 18 months ago. So as I said, we developed our own bioreactors, and it was the perfect place to start optimizing it. So we have now a series of bioreactors from 250 to 3,000 liters, which is approximately enough to dye between 50, 60 to 600 t-shirts at a time from one batch. So we are not yet at the scale of the biggest dyeing houses. A dye house in general produces can produce 8 to 10 tons of fabric a day. But we are on the process of numbering up the number of bioreactors we can have in one dye house, or actually have a scale up from one small to a big bioreactor. And we want to make sure that this works like without any flow. So we want to have a standardized process, and it starts from the standardized way of producing the strain, a standardized process, a standardized way of capturing the data. So we are not just offering a strain and a bioreactor, we are also offering a process, a standardized media recipe, so that when you brew, it's like when you brew beer, you want to have always the same taste, then we always want to have the same color at the end. So it's always the same components, dye the same way, at the same temperature, that we keep as low as possible to remain as sustainable as possible. And then we have a way of capturing the data so that there is a good monitoring of what we do, and we make sure for the clients that it remains actually in the quality criteria that they need to achieve for the clients. So that's, to me and to us, actually, that's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing, is scaling up and remaining actually and meeting the client's criteria at any scale, and actually meeting the needs they have in terms of quantity. So that's exactly what we are doing. We're implementing different dyeing houses now in Europe and soon beyond Europe. And for now, it works well in the partner dye house that we have. We have also a production site that we have implemented in Cambridge, so that we can actually test our process, our production and our dyeing process in-house before we implement it with confidence at client sites.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good development plans.
Yeah, maybe it's to develop, but that's very important to get the confidence.
No, you're completely right, and it's to meet the industry standards, and it's also not unusual in the sense that you said dyeing houses existed for centuries, but it is new in terms of the technology you're developing, and so maybe you don't have equal standards to relate with in terms of this bioreactor consistency, etc. So that's interesting to meet the two, and that you're having these considerations right now for your scaling up purpose. I guess we talked about the industry concern they may have, and actually what I'm hearing here, it's not massive, and it's definitely balanced by the huge benefits they are seeing into getting more of this sustainable technology to be brought to their industry. I guess I'd like to return the question to you too, in terms of how do you select the partners you want to work with? You hinted into that, into you want to be a bit picky on who you work with, because you're small and because you want to make sure you find the right partners. So can I just get your feedback on what is a good partner for you? And if this partner is listening, maybe you can continue.
Yeah, so we would like to move pretty fast on our testing. For example, that we already test our material with a brand in a London factory. So that's a very good partnership for us, because we can immediately get feedbacks, on-hand feedback on the material, how we perform with, for example, needles, the sewing, the stitching, with embroidering, and also, for example, hot press, embossing, etc. Those are very important information and feedback that we need early on, so help us to guide the further development of the material. And also, for example, that brand, even the CEO sent me a message saying, oh, we accidentally washed your leather product in laundry with surfactants. I know it's not supposed to, but we did it anyway, so we just share you an update, and this is what we found actually. there are some problems, but the majority of the material it's fantastic. There's no leaching of any colors, so it's very well perceived from the brand. And also this sort of extra data point is helpful for us to know on how we can improve. For example, you mentioned, okay, at the edges there might be some detachment, but we can sort of improve that by sealing the edges. So these are a good example of collaboration that we have, and which help us to move forward from, for example, TFL4 to TFL5, and that's really useful. I guess for the larger brands, sometimes the admin side can be can take a longer time, and then it can tend to be slower. But at the same time, I think the technical in-house team of those large brands, because they have vertically integrated tanneries, it can be very useful. We can discuss how the finishing can be applied in our material, and what type of expertise in terms of the finishing that they have in-house, and what do they need from us. So those information is always also very valuable for us. So I think for me, it really depends on what type of the partner that we're engaging with, and we define what will be the most valuable outcome for the scope of engagement. That's how I approach the partnership building.
Thanks, Yudi. Sophie, anything to add? Maybe also on just them meeting the high standards that you have for yourself in terms of sustainability, equality, etc.
Yeah, definitely. We are more willing to partner with people that are already sensitive to sustainability questions and issues, which is more and more frequent, luckily, in the industry. But still, we're also very careful in working with people that have good ethics standards, and you can still, unfortunately, find some child labor, or then we want to make sure that there is a good governance, a healthy governance of the dye house. So all of these ethics and social requirements are something we are looking at. We don't want to work for people just to greenwash their process. We are very careful at making sure that we can actually scale up, or that the technical requirements are there. And for now, we have been fortunate to work with people that are extremely professional, and then have been very welcoming with our new technology.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And successful. So I think we are coming to an end of this discussion. That was really interesting. But because we are at the end of the year, and that's the tradition of Genesis being this review of what happened in the sector, I can just close off with asking both of you what you would wish for 2022 for Colorifix and High Biotech, so for your organization. Yudi, you want to start?
Yeah,
That's
so
the big wish for
very
2022.
I'm very excited about our pilot studies, and to increase our capacity on larger size of samples, as well as the how many sheets of sample we can produce. So definitely that will allow us to do more trials with brands, and hopefully we can see capsules collections of high biotech material. That's my wish.
That would be amazing. Sophie, the big 2022 wish for Colorifix.
It's going to be 2022. It's definitely going to be an exciting year. So because we like colors, we are always in the quest for new colors from nature that we can integrate in our color palettes. We are also in the process of implementing different dye houses and different partners. So we are looking into starting having an impact actually in the textile industry, and keep increasing the scale up so that we can actually have an offer that can fit more dye houses requirements, and then keep democratizing technology.
Sounds like a really good plan. And I will definitely be a customer of that type of textile. So looking forward to that. So thank you very much. It was short but very insightful. And obviously that's the kind of topic we could talk forever. And I hope the audience also liked it. So just to reinforce that, Sophie, Yudi, they are on the Genesis app. So if you would like to ask them further questions, make contact because you're interested in what they're doing, feel free to do so. I'm sure they will be happy to answer to you. And thank you for listening, and wish you a very successful rest of the Genesis conference. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.